Voltaire. Thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Thank you for agreeing to come to such a creepy place.
Thank you for, having us.
It's my pleasure.
So, one of the reasons why you've been our top most wanted list for interviews is because you have a long history of being influenced by Japanese aesthetics and pop culture in your work. So, could you give a little background on how you first got into Japan?
Well, when I was a very, very small child, I started making stop-motion animated films. But the work that I always did for myself on my own featured all of these really strange, bizarre creatures, lots of them with tentacles and just all sorts of bizarre mythological monsters. And back then, and this is 1984, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, they would love you in Japan." And I really didn't know what that meant. I ended up going in 89.
Oh, okay.
By the time I went, it was 89, but
pre-bubble and everything.
Yeah, and and what actually ended up happening was that I fell in love with Japan.
And was chi-chian your first sort of more Japanese inspired explicitly?
Absolutely. That first trip to Japan, I had this agent who was helping me out, and he had set up a meeting for me at Bandai.
Okay.
And all he said to me was, the people at Bandai want to talk to you about directing a feature film. And I think I was 22. I was really young. I had already directed a handful of TV commercials here. I directed commercials for MTV and Sci-Fi Channel and people like that. And so I had a directing reel. So it wasn't completely off the chart that somebody would invite me to direct a feature film, but it was nonetheless pretty crazy.
Right.
And so I went to Bandai for this meeting, and I had long hair that I had in a giant bow, and I was wearing, I'll never forget it, a black wool John Richmond suit. So it was a black wool double-breasted suit with leather sleeves that said "Destroy" in big white print.
Wow.
And I was wearing rubberized black snakeskin pants and these high-heeled pointy black boots. And I walked into this meeting and I sat down with maybe 10 executives from Bandai, and they looked at me and said, "Okay, tell us about the movie."
Oh.
And I said, "What movie?" And they said, "The movie you are going to direct." I said, "I think there's been a misunderstanding here." I thought I was being hired to direct a film that you have a script for. But it was a very awkward moment, as we all realized that nobody was really there for the same reason. And I left, and I just remember leaving Bandai thinking that I had been handed this incredible opportunity and that I didn't have a script to pitch. I went to Cafe Via Ben on Omotesando, and I sat down, and I thought to myself, if I was going to tell a story, who would this story be about that it would move me so intensely and so deeply that it might actually move other people as well? And I began to draw, much to the chagrin of the staff, on the tablecloth. And I drew this girl who over time became chi-chian. 8 years later, I had so much information, I thought I have to do something with this. And I thought it was a little late to go back to Bandai 8 years later, so I decided to make it as a comic book. So I started writing and drawing what eventually became the Chi-Chian comic book series.
After you started doing chi-chian, then did you sort of expand into the world of Japanese aesthetics a little more? Now that you sort of had been there, you were inspired. I know you ended up later working on with people like Junko Mizuno and other Japanese artists. I mean, did that sort of open the world up for you?
Well, the thing about Chi-Chian is she is a half Japanese girl living in Manhattan in the 31st century. And the really interesting thing about it for me is that the kinds of things that I was seeing in Japan that captured my imagination to a Japanese person are on opposite ends of the spectrum. There's a lot of tentacles in the world of Chi-Chian. And so you could say that there's a hentai influence, although none of Chi-Chian is pornographic or anything like that. At the core of the Chi-Chian story is this story about a young girl who's so innocent, living in a world that's so dark. And I cannot live in a world where people would ever read chi-chian without knowing that it's directly inspired by Miyazaki's work. So, Laputa, Castle in the Sky, and My Neighbor Totoro were the only films of his that I had seen before I made chi-chian. And then later, after chi-chian was finished, I saw Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and I almost freaked out because it's so similar. There's so many parallels between chi-chian and Nausicaa. Her love of giant insects and her fighting against, her family and her society's perception of nature and these creatures.
So you were almost like unwittingly influenced by...
I was unwittingly influenced, I suppose, by hentai and Miyazaki. So chi-chian's like this mashing of the weirdest things about Japan and the most beautiful things about Japan, I think.
So, I first discovered Deady when I was Midtown Comics, and I was looking for Junko Mizuno stuff.
Oh, Junko Mizuno.
And they were like, here, try this.
Oh,
and I was
wow,
like,
that's great.
Voltaire. I know of him from the internet and the goth scene.
Yeah, Deady was my most recent comic book series, and they were a series of graphic novels that were 48 pages long each. Each one had 38 pages that I wrote and drew, and then another 10 pages of guest art, and I really went overboard finding the best guest artists. One of the issues has a 4-page story written by Neil Gaiman. Clive Barker wrote Hellraiser meets Deady. James O'Barr did The Crow meets Deady. And then Junko Mizuno did a story, and David Mack did a pinup, the creator of Kabuki. Billy Tucci, who does She, and Yasushi Nirasawa, who's my favorite Japanese monster designer, did a pinup as well. So there were four 48-page books, and the last one was called Deady Big in Japan, where Deady goes to Japan to become a tentacle film star.
There's this tentacle theme I've noticed throughout your work.
Theme, yes. In 2007, I was invited to be, I guess, the guest of honor at this Hot Wheels custom car show in Osaka, Japan.
That is awesome.
It's so incredible because I got to design 2 Hot Wheels cars, which is probably every American kid's dream.
Yeah.
So I made a Deady hearse as well as a chi-chian truck, and this was the official 2-car set of the convention. And then because I am a workaholic, I scheduled a show in Tokyo. So then we went up to Tokyo and I played a show there as well.
And you've played before? You'd played already in Japan.
I've played in Osaka before.
Oh, okay.
I think that was my only time playing in Tokyo.
You're also a filmmaker. You make short films.
That is absolutely correct and very astute of you.
I did my homework.
I do make short films, short stop motion films, and they're very short and very strange. They're experimental. As far as I'm concerned, they don't have to make sense. It's me having fun as an animator like I did when I was a 10-year-old with a Super 8 camera. Just making models and setting them up and then having them do whatever comes to mind. And then I take them out and do the film festival circuit with them. They've all been narrated by singers. I did one with Debbie Harry of Blondie. I did one with Richard Butler of the Psychedelic Furs, Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance. The last one was narrated by Danny Elfman. And then the most recent one actually has a Japanese title. It's called Odokuro. And Odokuro is narrated by Gary Newman, electro goth legend. Gary Newman.
Thinking us into being, nudging us into existence.
And it's a gothic sci-fi tale with a little bit of a Twilight Zone twist. The skeleton of a Sumatran rat monkey comes to life in a room full of cursed objects. And so it sort of becomes an analogy for humankind, this monkey skeleton and the things it goes through. And that's doing the film festival circuit right now.
Reanimated monkeys into this world for the amusement of a malicious, all-seeing deity. What is life on this world anyway?
And I just submitted it to Hiroshima Animation Film Festival, and I've always wanted to be in that film festival, so crossing my fingers and hoping that they accept it, because I'd also love to go to Hiroshima. I've never been there. And I have other plans for this film, because this film's in black and white, but I also have the color version. Let me tell you a little story about the film. This room full of cursed objects has a pile of cassettes, and the two most prominently placed cassettes are a Gary Newman cassette, and he ended up becoming the narrator, and the other cassette is Bakchiku. It's a Japanese band.
Yeah.
So I have a dream that after it's done doing the festival circuit, I will release the color version, translated into Japanese, narrated by a certain Japanese singer of note. And I'll leave it at that. But that's my dream.
Since we are a show about Japanese things in New York, are there any places that you go to get a little taste of Japan, or that you've gone over the years that you can pimp out? East Village is such a hotbed of Japanese culture.
I think for many, many years I went to Decibel for sake because they had just such a lengthy sake list. But Kenka is my current favorite. I go to Kenka more often than is really reasonable. I've become really good at making cotton candy because of them. I don't really love cotton candy myself because I'm getting futoi ni narimashita. So I'm getting kind of fat, so I stay off the cotton candy. But I make amazing cotton candy there. But the sake list is unbelievable. The sake list is unbelievable. And if you go to Kenka, I highly recommend the very best sake on the menu is the Jozen Mizuno Gotoshi. So please try the Jozen Mizuno Gotoshi because it's on sale. No, I'm kidding. It's not on sale, but it's really good.
There's going to be like a...
Jozen Mizuno Gotoshi. And I have to tell you a quick story. I have gone to Kenka so often that I've gotten so good at making the cotton candy that one day my wife and I went there, and there was a line of people to make the cotton candy, and so I started making hers. And when it was finished, it was so beautiful and so perfect. It was this pink teardrop, just so perfectly shaped. And I handed it to her, and she smiled, and there was a couple standing next to us, and the woman looked at the man, and she said, "Mine better look like that." It was brilliant. It was so funny.
Putting people to shame.
But yes, we love going there. And we love the food, and the people are really funny and cool. And, it's downstairs from a punk rock shop. And you have to love a place where the menu says, "The seat is for your ass. Keep your ass in the seat." Love that. If you throw up, you have to clean it yourself.
I didn't realize that was the rule.
I think there's like a $25 fine, and you have to clean it up yourself. That's badass. And then they blare music over these megaphones. I'm pretty sure I've heard the theme to Godzilla a few times. Eat up, kids.
Might be your last meal.
Yes.
Have you considered doing commercials in Japan?
I would love to do commercials in Japan.
So how can people get in contact with you?
Yes, www.voltaire.net.
Good. I think we have...
I think I'd be the man. Could you imagine? Where should I do my screen test?
Well, I think you'd be great for Black Boss.
How about this
coffee?
one?
The Black
Did I do this
Boss
one?
Coffee?
All right.
Yeah.
Cosmo Shoken. Toke yori hayaku goku. How's that?
Yeah.
Did I get the job?
Yeah. Your Nihongo. Sugoi.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Right.
That was like an evilly synchronized laugh.